Good evening, and thanks for joining us on a special edition of the Week in Review. I'm Nick Blumberg. We hope you had a great holiday and that if you braved Black Friday shopping, you came out unscathed. But if you're feeling a little anxious about the economy and decided to skip the stores this year, well, you aren't alone.
As much progress as we've made, it's going to take a little bit of time for every American to feel that economic boom, which we really do believe is coming.
But a new Deloitte survey shows a majority of Americans don't agree, with 57% saying they think the economy will get weaker over the next 6 months and 77% bracing for higher prices on holiday items.
The market's been a little crazy, so I think we've seen coffee prices double in the past 12 months. But when you have a 50% tariff looming, you know, it just, you don't know how you're going to make a decision the next month.
Local business owners and Illinois farmers say whiplash trade wars are driving up costs and making it harder to plan for the future. This as the Supreme Court mulls a challenge to Trump's claims of sweeping tariff powers brought by a Chicagoland business owner.
I thought after COVID, like, all right, we're in the clear. We don't have to think of anything spontaneous or something to survive anymore. And a couple years later, here we are again.
Other local businesses say aggressive immigration enforcement and the threat of National Guard troops on the streets create uncertainty and drive down sales.
We stand behind the progressive revenue that we have put forward because this moment calls for those with means to put more skin in the game.
Mayor Brandon Johnson pushes a budget proposal that aims to make large corporations pay a head tax. Meantime, credit rating agency S&P drops Chicago's outlook to negative. But it's not all doom and gloom, with Moody's upgrading Illinois' credit rating. Good news for Governor J.B. Pritzker, and that wasn't all the governor celebrated.
What a historic day for Chicago, for Illinois, for the quantum industry, for our economy, and for our future.
Officials break ground on a major new quantum computing hub on the disused former U.S. Steel Southworks site. And the Chicago Fire plans to break ground early next year for a new stadium on vacant South Loop land known as the 78.
And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Shruti Singh of Bloomberg News, Brian Rogel of the Chicago Tribune, and via Zoom, Amy Yee of the Chicago Sun-Times. Thank you all for being here. Let's get right into it. So Brian, there was a lot in that Deloitte survey, but not necessarily all bad. What stood out to you?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, obviously it's not good for stores if there's going to be a decline in sales. But when you delve into the data, you can see that people are worried about inflation, but not necessarily panicking about it. It's only certain groups that are talking about cutting spending, and mainly it's younger people. You know, Gen Z, millennials, they're the ones who are going to say they're going to hold back a little on spending. But most people are not going to be cutting, you know, based on what they said, that they're not going to be cutting the gift spending. It's more going to be the extras, extras for like parties, things like that. I mean, there is going to be a decline in spending, but kind of the core of kind of the Christmas experience, people still seem dedicated to doing that. So it is kind of a mixed picture.
Yeah, and especially since, it's not like inflation is something that just hit this year, so, folks have maybe already found ways to adjust for that.
Right.
Amy, a lot of the economic uncertainty this year has involved inflation as well as, tariffs, which you have covered extensively. In particular, what have you been hearing from some local small businesses about the effect there?
I haven't really heard anyone say that tariffs are good for them. I have talked to some manufacturers, for example, and keep in mind that tariffs were supposed to ultimately reshore manufacturing back to the U.S. However, manufacturers like Friedman Seating, which is based in Chicago, employs about 700 people. A lot of their components come from international markets. So you can't just really shut that off with a spigot. So they were hurting when I spoke to them earlier this year, and the uncertainty continues. So most businesses I've talked to, the vast majority, are very affected by tariffs. They keep changing, they spike, and then they go back down. A company called Learning Resources, which is at the heart of that Supreme Court case, they managed over the summer to pivot some of their toy manufacturing from China to India very quickly, which is kind of miraculous, actually. But then Learning Resources told me that when some of those supplies, some of that inventory was on its way to the US, suddenly India was slapped with tariffs of 50%. And then the tariffs on products from India were more expensive than from China. So it's very hard for companies, for businesses to know, and smaller businesses, the more vulnerable they are.
Yeah, I can imagine they sort of feel like they're playing this game as the rules keep changing. Brian, one of the sectors of the economy dealing with tariffs, this sort of back and forth, on and off again that you've covered, is development here in Chicago. How's that been playing out?
Well, developers, a year and a half ago, they probably thought they'd be in a good place now. They probably thought that interest rates were going to decline, and that makes money cheaper. It makes it easier to kick off development. And then at the start of this year, here come these tariffs making things more expensive. Steel is more expensive, aluminum's more expensive, concrete, basically everything that goes into a building, and it's kind of thrown them for a loop. I mean, it's not certain that we'd have seen a huge amount of development if there were no tariffs, but it is a worry. It's another thing that they hadn't really planned on a year ago. And there was at least one developer who said, we were going to build a 400-unit tower in Fulton Market, and they said the tariffs really killed it because their investors said, too expensive.
Yeah. Shruti, Trump administration policies, they've also had an effect on state and local budgets. Governor Pritzker earlier this year asked state agencies to find some ways they could make spending trims. What are the concerns there?
Well, in terms of the uncertainty that all of you guys have talked about, one of the pieces of uncertainty is the grants and federal funding that might be flowing through to state and local governments, whether it's the state, the city, or schools. And some of it's unknown. Some of it's, just roadblocks. Some of it is questions about the long-term feasibility of projects. You talked about the development for steel and things like that. But some of these projects also need some certainty in terms of what funding is funneling in. So those are some of the concerns that states, cities, and other taxing bodies have. So what the governor asked earlier this year was for the departments to pull back on some of their spending, to put some money into the reserves just as a cushion, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next budget cycle.
Yeah.
And this current budget as well, I should say.
Yeah, and especially because, some of these things, it seems like they're not necessarily telegraphing these moves, these funding freezes, or revisiting them can kind of come out of the clear blue sky.
Yeah, so some of the funding freezes, as we hear about them, but they don't actually go through sometimes. Sometimes it's just unclear exactly what's going to happen. Some of the things have sort of, been just talked about, and then there's worries about it. But we really just need to know, I think, long-term what's going to happen in terms of this funding, right? And there's just not a clear understanding. And the reason that's important is that a lot of this money was something that state and local governments were taking for granted.
Sure.
It just came every year. It was part of the budget. And now we don't know that for sure.
Yeah. Amy, you mentioned the trade war with China. That's had some consequences, in particular for Illinois farmers when it comes to soybeans. Tell us about that.
It's a huge deal. So Illinois is the largest producer of soybeans in the U.S., which I say because I did not realize that until I started covering this. Most of that is exported, and a lot of that is exported to China. China is the biggest market and export market for soybeans. So what happens with tariffs is that China will then place retaliatory tariffs on exports from the U.S., which are usually agricultural goods like soybean and corn. So farmers are hardest hit by these retaliatory tariffs. And so it means those markets that are so valuable to them close off. So there's been a lot of turmoil for agriculture. Until recently, China had not bought any soybean crops from this season's harvest at all. That's a huge amount. That's I want to say about $12 billion worth of soybeans for Illinois normally. So imagine cutting off that very important market for that $12 billion worth of soybeans. In turn, China turned to Argentina, and they've also turned to Brazil. And this already happened in Trump's first term, where he introduced tariffs. And again, agriculture were, American farmers, they were most affected, were highly affected. And so China built up other markets to source their soybeans from. So they went to Brazil, for example. And so market share from American farmers has been taken up, by South American countries. And so until recently, the U.S. had not sold any of its soybean crop. And so there was a lot of turmoil and almost a crisis moment is what I've been told. So some people have alluded to, perhaps this could be, another farm crisis, like we've seen, in the 80s. So there's a lot of uncertainty and turmoil there.
Absolutely. Shruti, we were talking about Governor Pritzker. Of course, there's been a fair amount of pushback to the Trump administration policies at the local level. A move from Chicago City Treasurer to try and draw a line in the sand. What's she looking to do?
So the Chicago Treasurer, Melissa Conyers-Irwin, is proposing to stop buying treasuries directly for the city assets. Now, point of fact is that the city doesn't actually own any treasuries directly to begin with right now.
Minor details.
So last year in 2024 was the last time they owned it, and it was just about $8 million out of a portfolio of about $9 billion. So $8 million out of $9 billion, right? What the other thing she's proposing is to ask the city council for permission to somehow change policies so that money market funds that hold treasuries, she may be able to shift away from some of that too. Now that's a different policy, but it's to be seen whether the city council is going to go along with that. One alderman just called it reckless. Another one questioned how it makes fiscal and financial sense when treasuries have outperformed some of the returns that the portfolio overall has provided. So lots of questions, unclear whether there's going to be any support in city council.
Brian, we were talking about holiday shopping. Chicago's Loop, traditionally a huge destination for shoppers. Mm-hmm. In recent years, though, seen its fair share of challenges, of vacancies. But you've been doing some reporting on some upstart businesses there who say there's a recovery going on.
Yeah, it's too much to say that the Loop has recovered, obviously, because it got hit with a double tsunami of, the rise of online retail and then the pandemic. So it's going to take many years for the Loop to find a new business model which works. But you do see like green shoots of energy coming up. There are a lot of new entrepreneurs who are looking at the Loop saying, you know what, we can get a deal for a lease and open up a space like the clothing store Raygun, which is going to be opening next year on State Street. Small-time restaurateurs who are looking for spaces. So it's starting to look up. There's a few dozen restaurants that have opened, a few dozen restaurants and apparel stores that are opening in the Loop in the past couple of months, and then start into next year. Now that sounds good. A few dozen, it's great, but the Loop lost hundreds of restaurants and retail outlets during the pandemic. So it is going to be a multi-year project. But at least if you're a business owner in the Loop right now, I think you can be pretty sure that things are going to be better next year.
Yeah, at least a sense of momentum, if not fully back where they were.
And if you're an office worker, there's going to be more options, and that's going to be very important to getting people to come back to the office because people want to have places they can go to which are, unusual, right. Maybe something you can't find at home, I guess.
Well, and of course, this comes on the heels of some very aggressive, immigration enforcement, as well as President Trump wanting to send the National Guard itself into Chicago. What do the business owners that you've spoken with think of the prospect of Guard troops on the streets?
They are just, that is like the big cloud that's hanging over, I think, the city. You've seen a huge impact on businesses out in the neighborhoods like Little Village, Albany Park. I know a number of places that have closed. The Loop didn't seem to be hit very hard by this the past couple of months, but it is something that they're worried about. I did talk to restaurateurs in Washington, D.C., where the Guard was, and they were just seeing cuts in business like 30% at least, and that was on the average. So I think business owners in the Loop are worried that what they've seen out in the neighborhoods is going to come down to the Loop next year.
Amy, you've heard from a lot of folks about how Operation Midway Blitz affected businesses, particularly in neighborhoods that saw a lot of immigration raids. What did you hear from folks?
Yeah, the impact has been tremendous. I first spoke to some little village business owners back in the beginning of the year, right after the inauguration, and there was definitely a chilling effect then. However, raids had not actually started, so then uh, foot traffic and business started to come back in the spring. And then, this summer, end of the summer and in the fall, you saw this a really aggressive deportation campaign, and that quashed any fledgling signs of recovery. So even when I spoke to one business owner who's a Latino business owner who caters to the businesses, the wholesaler, back in the spring, he said his business was down 40%. Now imagine it now with this extremely visible and aggressive campaign that's it seems like it's meant to frighten and intimidate people. And just earlier this month, when you have business leaders head of the Chicago Land Chamber of Commerce or the former head of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce were saying this has had a huge negative impact and literally said that these actions are scaring people away from going out, from, this person who's Jack Lavin, who's the head of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. He named the Loop in particular, which kind of surprised me. So I was surprised at how vocal these business leaders were about the impact that they are hearing and seeing. So in Illinois alone, the GDP of Latino consumers is worth billions. And if people are scared to go out or scared to go and buy things, or if they are self-deporting, leaving, you're also going to see a big hit to labor.
Right.
Already, many were struggling with finding enough workers. So if you take out this very large portion of workers in Chicago, businesses overall will continue to, it adds to their struggles.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to recover from that very quickly. Shruti, another issue that local businesses have been watching very closely, in this case, large corporations. This is the mayor's proposal to include a head tax in the city budget. Not clear whether there's the support on the council there, but what's the mayor looking to do?
So in the budget that the mayor proposed, he was asking for a $21 per head monthly head tax on corporations over 100 people, or employers, I should say, with more than 100 people who were spending at least 50% of their time in the city. Then there was some alterations made to that proposal and then brought back again. But then about a week ago, the city council, in a vote 25-10, rejected the whole revenue plan. So at this point, we're in a recess and there are talks going on, and we're going to come back in December and see, are there alternate revenue options that City Council is proposing? Has the mayor come to any sort of consensus with the opposition within the City Council?
Yeah. All right, Brian, something that doesn't involve tax dollars at all. This is the privately funded, what an idea, new Chicago Fire Stadium. Mm-hmm. What can we expect there? What's the timeline like?
They're going to get started construction very soon. I mean, this is going to be I think a game changer for that whole development down there, the 78. The developer, Related Midwest, has been searching for an anchor tenant for years, and now they finally have it. I mean, it's one of the really true bright spots for the downtown, I think.
Yeah. Well, and another big piece of development news is that quantum computing hub on the far south side. What can we expect from that site?
I'm really not sure how that's going to work out for Chicago as a whole. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it's going to be an extraordinary thing to have billions of dollars of investment that go into that area. How that impacts Chicago, the wider city, I think is unknown, because one of the questions is how many people are actually going to work there. This was the Southwark Steel Plant. It was the economic heart of the South Side. 20,000 people work there at its height. And how many people are going to be working at this quantum campus, probably, you know, a fraction of that, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, these companies sometimes just don't employ that many people. They do say that they are going to need manufacturers and a supply chain that's basically, you know, sending goods into this. So we'll see what shakes out. But
yeah, it might be more of a sort of a psychological win, seeing such a long vacant site, you know,
right.
Actually something coming in there.
And the developer is planning on, you know, putting in retail and housing down there, so it's not just going to be a quantum campus. They've got a lot of land, and they seem like they want to put it to use.
All right, well, from quantum to AI, Amy, you reported on these AI holiday shopping scams. How exactly do those work?
Yeah, so holiday season is prime time for scammers for online shopping, when people are online and they're distracted by everything, holidays, vacations coming up, and gifts, and everything else involving racing to the end of the year. So they take it, scammers take advantage of that. So that's in a normal holiday season. Now AI is actually contributing to the number of these scams and their authenticity. So they look very real, often using real photos from the company's website, or even down to the shopping cart, and kind of targeting people more with these very genuine looking shopping sites or what have you. And I know this because this happened to me a few months ago. It wasn't holiday shopping, but it was shopping. And I looked pretty carefully and checked everything. And they used the name of a real store, and the pictures and all the wording was exactly real for Hoka running shoes. That's what it was. Hokas are expensive, and so when you see a deal when they're $35, first of all, I did say this is too good to be true, but I kept looking at the site and looked very real. So when I learned recently that AI is contributing to how authentic these look, that made total sense to me. So I wanted to just get the word out that this is a real thing. And so, I had an article run this week about how AI is contributing to online shopping scams.
Yeah, taking your negative experience and turning it into something good. So we thank you for that. We are almost out of time, but before we go, I want to ask Amy very briefly, what are you most looking ahead to next year on your beat?
Something immediate next year, but it's this weekend. So Saturday is Small Business Saturday. I'm working on an article about that. And this year, for some Chicago businesses, this is more important than ever. It seems like this could be, make or break them. So there's a campaign, an online campaign with about 35 local businesses, spearheaded by Mojo Spa, which is in the park. And lots of other local businesses. And they are, literally on their website, they were begging people to come in.
Right.
So this is a sentiment shared by a lot of businesses. And I do just want to say that there are apparently a lot of businesses that have closed in the last 6 months in Wicker Park and Bucktown, which is, pretty affluent area even. So
right. Those areas are hardly immune from those issues. So we know a lot of folks are looking out for that. Shruti, how about you? What are you looking for?
I'll be, just chronicling what's going on with the budgets. We're still waiting for budget season to completely wrap up here in Chicago, so I'll be covering it all the way to the end. Then shortly thereafter, we go right into the state's budget season. And so really trying to get a handle on what all this uncertainty is going to mean in terms of costs for state and local governments, and then what that's going to mean for local residents in terms of services and other types of taxes, if anything.
All right, Brian, I'm coming back to you, but for right now, we are out of time. So our thanks to Shruti Singh, Brian Rogal, and Amy Yee. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family. The Polk Brothers Foundation. Additional support is provided by
And that's our show for this Friday night. If you're looking for something festive to do this holiday weekend, be sure to check out our website for our holiday events guide. That's at WTTW.com/holiday events. Now for the Week in Review, I'm Nick Blumberg. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay informed. Have a great weekend. All right, last but not least, what are you watching out for this year?
Well, just left on its own, Chicago would probably continue its slow and steady recovery, both the retail and the office market. So what I'm really wondering is what ICE is going to be doing and the Border Patrol, because that could really, I think, scramble a lot of expectations.
Yeah. Well, and certainly we've heard that, in the immediate term, this, big wave of CBP agents has moved on, but it sounds like they're coming back.
They may come back. I mean, ICE is recruiting a lot of people, many thousands, and so they were here once in January, then they left, and they seem to come back the past couple of months. Now they seem to be leaving again. So the question is, are they going to come back, but even in bigger numbers? And I think it's at least a possibility.
Oh, absolutely.
The big thing that they really need to...
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that gives back to its community in Chicago and beyond.